Okay, so let's start off with the facts. Let's begin with a little bit of background on Qatar. Qatar, which is officially known as the State of Qatar, is a sovereign country located in Western Asia. Following Ottoman rule, Qatar became a British protectorate in the early 20th century until gaining independence in 1971. However, Qatar has been ruled by the House of Thani since the early 19th century. Sheikh Jassim bin Mohammed Al Thani was the founder of the State of Qatar. Today, Qatar is a hereditary monarchy, and its head of state is Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani. Now, as I mentioned, Qatar is a pretty small country, but when we look at the population, how many people actually live in Qatar? From the latest numbers in early 2017, the population of Qatar was 2.6 million people. And that ranks it at 422nd in the world based on the population by country. And when we break down that number, it's 313,000 Qatar citizens, and there's 2.3 temporary residents of Qatar. Now, when we explore the total land area of Qatar, it's 11,610 square kilometers. That's roughly 4,483 square miles. Doha is the capital city of Qatar, and it's also the biggest city. Doha's total population is 344,939 people. Now, when we travel to downtown Doha, near the waterfront, we see tons of parks, as well as the Corniche Promenade. On a man-made island, we also see the Museum of Islamic Art that has a massive art collection from different places all across the Muslim world. Over 60% of the residents in Qatar actually live in Doha, the capital city, and the population density of Doha is pretty high. Like, according to the latest numbers, it's 221.3 people per square kilometer. But when you look at the total population density of Qatar in general, Qatar is at 221.3 people per square kilometers, and its population density has increased from 7.4 people per square kilometer in the year 1967 all the way to 221.3 people per square kilometer, and it's growing at an average annual of 7.25%. Okay guys, so I grew up speaking English, and to some people I may be pronouncing the word Qatar a bit differently than you are. But you see, all of the different pronunciations of Qatar you would say are correct, right? The word Qatar can be pronounced in several different ways. And some of the common ways of pronouncing it are Qatar, and then there's Qatar, 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 and Qatar. Really, when you go to different parts of the world, people pronounce it differently, but they're all correct, okay? And people in Qatar don't seem to mind. I don't hear them really complaining about the pronunciation, so they're all acceptable ways to pronounce it. So yeah, that wasn't really a fact, just kind of just some fun information. And also, I don't want to hear in the comment section, Leroy, you're pronouncing Qatar wrong. Yeah, I know sometimes my pronunciation sucks, guys. I get it, okay? Okay, so moving on, let's talk about the cities and districts in Qatar. The cities and districts are generally named after their geographical features. For instance, Doha means roundness, and it reflects the rounded bays that categorize Qatar's coastlines. Gualina means mother of Gulen, and Gulen is a kind of shrub that grows in that area. And also there's Umslai Ali, which means mother of rocks. If you ever visit Qatar, you'll probably notice that their weekend system operates differently. It's not Saturday and Sunday like here in North America and other parts of the world, but actually it falls on Friday and Saturday. So you can expect stores to be closed on Friday morning in observance of the afternoon prayer. When it comes to eating food in Qatar, so Qatar isn't the source of most of their food production. Actually, 92% of its food is imported. And the countries that they mainly import food from are countries nearby like Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Syria. And some of Qatar's cuisine dates back to a few millennia. One of Qatar's most popular dishes is a pretty simple dish. It's haris made from wheat. It dates back to the 10th century, and it's documented in the Arabic text called the Cooking Book. There are even many claims and evidence of haris being a dish eaten during the time of the Prophet Muhammad in the 6th century. One thing also to know about Qatar, is probably one of the most common facts though, is that petrol is extremely cheap, guys. Since Qatar has the highest GDP per capita in the world, as well as being the biggest exporter of liquid gas in the world, the country's oil and gas revenues are a huge contributing factor to its GDP. GDP. So of course, for the local people, gas prices are super cheap. And I mean, you can fill up a tank of gas for 50 Qatari riyal. And currently, 1 Qatari riyal is worth 27 cents in US dollars. Another thing to note about the culture in Qatar is that most women from other Gulf countries say that they prefer Qatari men. The Qatari men are supposed to be gentle, romantic, and more caring. Now, I just had to throw this fact in here because recently the 2018 FIFA World Cup wrapped up, but guess which country is hosting the next World Cup in 2022? Yeah, Qatar. It will be the first Middle Eastern country to host the FIFA tournament. Now, due to the intense heat of the summers there, the World Cup won't be held in June or July as usual, but it would actually be held in November to December instead. Now, there are major preparations happening in the country, including 9 new stadiums being constructed right now. And did you know that Qatar is also the safest country in the world? Like, there was an article in the Telegraph that quoted that Qatar is the least likeliest country in the world to be struck by a natural disaster. So like the most that happened in Qatar in recent years are aftershocks of earthquakes in neighboring countries, as well as they had some sandstorms. But pretty much you go to Qatar, it's like a paradise. You don't really have to worry about anything. Okay, now the last set of facts about Qatar that I want to share with you is about the tallest building. Did you know that the tallest building in the world was going to be in Qatar until the project got cancelled? It was supposed to be a 1,808 feet tower in Doha, and it was set to become one of the world's tallest buildings. But there was just one problem. It was so tall that officials worried that it would make it tough for pilots landing and taking off from the new airport. Construction was halted until Doha's new airport was finished, until the project was abruptly cancelled anyway. Qatar has been ruled by the Al Thani family since the early 1900s, when it was controlled by the British. On July 17, 1913, Sheikh Abdullah bin Qasim Al Thani became the ruler of Qatar. At the time, Qatar's primary industry was pearling and fishing. The country at the time was dealing with widespread poverty, malnutrition, and disease from the collapse of the pearl trade in the 1920s. In 1939, oil was discovered in the city of Dukhan, but development on the field was slow until 1949 because of World War II. While the oil discovery was great, it was nothing compared to the natural gas reserve found 30 years later. In 1951, Qatar produced 46,500 barrels of oil a day, amounting to $4.2 million in revenue. The discovery of offshore oil fields led to an increase in production to 230,000 barrels per day. Then, Qatar began a slow modernization process. The country's first school, hospital, and power plant, and even telephone exchange all opened in the 1950s. Oil revenue steadily increased through the 1960s as the Al Thani family grew stronger by placing relatives in high government positions. However, oil production is not expected to remain at its peak levels of 500,000 barrels a day because of the oil fields are projected to be mostly depleted by the year 2023. But Qatar has natural gas reserves to compensate for that. Qatar's reserves of gas are the third largest in the world. Qatar's reserves are estimated to be at 896 trillion cubic feet. In the year 1971, the world's largest natural gas field, the South Pars North Dome gas condensate field, was discovered off the coast of Qatar. But the crash of the oil prices in the 1980s stopped the growth of the economy. By the year 1995, the situation in Qatar had not improved until Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani took power in a coup, and then Qatar became a very powerful force. Hamad saw that keeping a low profile could be dangerous and set a whole new direction for the country. So how exactly did Hamad raise Qatar's profile in the world? What he ended up doing was pretty big. So first, he let the US set up its regional military headquarters, the Al Udeid Air Base, outside the capital city of Doha. The partnership with the US military has given Qatar a new level of security. Hamad then went on to integrate Qatar into the global economy. He built the world's largest facilities for condensing liquid natural gas and began exporting liquid natural gas for the first time. Following that, over the past 15 years, 14 liquid natural gas plants have been built in partnership with international oil companies. In the late 1990s, Qatar entered in production sharing agreements with several international oil companies. And in 1996, for those of you who keep up to date with anything to do with the news, well, you probably know about this. Hamad launched Al Jazeera, which is a 24-hour news station that combined aggressive reporting, high production value, as well as an Islamic worldview. Al Jazeera became huge, and the purpose of this organization was really about enhancing Qatar's visibility as well as its influence. But the channel has gone on to be one of the most important broadcasters in the whole Arab world when it comes to news. Qatar's GDP has skyrocketed over the past 15 years thanks to steady oil production and high natural gas production. In regards to planning for the future depletion of its oil, well, Qatar has taken measures to diversify its economy. In the year 1998, the government built Education City, which is a huge campus that supports 6 American and 2 European universities, as well as research centers. Qatar has a sovereign wealth fund of $170 billion. Then in the year 2005, Qatar established the Qatar Investment Authority to recycle oil and gas income into other income streams. In other words, it was set up to buy a lot of things around the world and thus reduces the country's exposure to the oil price. In London alone, it owns Harrods, the Shard, the Chelsea Barracks site, the US Embassy, and the Olympic Village site, among many others. It is also the largest shareholder in Sainsbury, which is just over a quarter of the business. And check this, guys, it also co-owns Miramax Films after purchasing it from Disney with a group of other investors. The Qatar Financial Center was built in 2005 to develop Qatar's financial services industry. The country believes it can become a financial services leader for the Gulf states thanks to its relative stability and large base of capital. In 2006, Qatar passed Indonesia to become the largest exporter of liquid natural gases in the world, with revenues from oil and natural gas amounting to 60% of Qatar's GDP. But more competition was coming, with liquid natural gas production booming in places like the United States as well as Australia. And then in December of 2010, Qatar was selected as host of the 2022 FIFA World Cup. And because of that, Qatar promised to build 12 state-of-the-art stadiums that would employ cooling technology so players could escape the heat. Qatar has positioned itself as a sporting hub for the region, hosting or planning to host numerous global sporting events. And last June, it was alleged that Qatar spent $5 million on bribes to secure the 2022 World Cup bid. Switzerland is now opening an investigation into mismanagement and money laundering related to Qatar's bid. So there's still quite a bit of controversy going on there, but hey, Qatar has really set itself up powerfully to be a powerhouse nation in the world.